chat. So I'm Sarah Brumfield.
And I'm Ben.
And together we're From the Page, if you haven't met us before, but many of you have. And today we're talking about enhanced search in From the Page. And we're really thrilled you're here. As we just mentioned, we had 130 people sign up for this, which kind of blew us away because it's a talk about a search feature in From the Page. But we're going to walk you through kind of our process of developing features, how we decide what to develop, and how we approached this. So we're going to go through our customer research, what we started out with. We did have search in From the Page to begin with. The process we went through from a development point of view and testing. We're going to give you a demo, and then we've got a couple of kind of advanced and fun possibility topics for after that. And then, feedback, Q&A, example searches you'd like us to run, anything like that, we'll walk through as well. So go ahead and go on. Oh, we will send out a recording of this, probably not until Monday though. But if you signed up, you'll be on the email that gets that. So why did we decide to build this, and where did it come from, and how do software companies, all two of us, decide to renovate something so basic as search instead of building, I don't know, flashy AI summarizers that frustrate all of us? The answer, if you're a software developer, is customer-driven product development. We don't always do this right. Many companies don't always do this right, but this is an example of when we did. And I think the number, we hope, yeah, and we think the number of people on the call today may be a testament to the fact that people were really interested in seeing this get better and From the Page. So this is Heather Wolf, and she's the curator of manuscripts for the Folger Shakespeare Library. And she's a super smart scholar on early modern manuscripts, and she's always looking for innovative ways to make manuscripts more accessible to scholars and the public. So conversations with her are always illuminating. We had visited with Heather right before the Society of American Archivists meeting in 2023 in DC. And one of the things Heather told us was that From the Page understood full text better than most other library and archives platforms, and that we should make it easier for people to search that text. We're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're probably right, because we're all about turning images of documents into full text, and the reason most people want full text is to search the text.
Right, and we don't have to do the kinds of complex item level metadata work that most digital library systems or institutional repositories have to, right? So we can focus on the actual page level text.
Right. So the day after we met with Heather, we actually hosted a user group meeting for From the Page customers and fans, people who, like those of you on this call, who are interested in what we're doing. And one of the things we asked people to do at that user group meeting was to vote on features they wanted to see in From the Page. We used a methodology called dot voting. We gave everyone, I think, 10 dot stickers, blue for customers, yellow for fans, and they could spend their dots however they wanted. I think we had 10 or 12 different features hung up on the walls around the room. And so, like, if search was by far the most interesting thing to you, you could have put all 10 of your dots on it. If it was, half of your interest, you could have put 5 dots on it and then spread your other dots around the other things that we were thinking about investing our time in.
Right. And the thing is, this sheet was not even printed out. We did not bring it with us to DC. We had to go find a place to print it out because it had not occurred to us to offer this as a possible feature for people to vote on until our conversation with Heather.
Right. So the overwhelming winner was better search, which astonished us. If you happen to look at the other features here, we are thinking about and starting to work on 2 and 3 as well. But obviously, from this and the interest from this, we needed to work on search first. So this was not obvious to us until we walked out of that meeting and we're like, okay, we should think about doing better search. But when you go back and start looking for other clues, they were there. We had done a big customer survey in fall of 2022, and one of the 30 responses was that we should work on improving search within each work. So I would not say that was obvious, but it's still a clue, right? You're building a case for this. And then after this survey, we conducted about 10 customer interviews, and search came up in those interviews. The most interesting one from a search perspective was Meg Winslow, who's the lone archivist at the Mount Auburn Cemetery, a historic site outside of Boston, who told us that she uses From the Page to search her archives. When her executive director asks, "What did the early trustees think about this?" She actually does a Google search with FromThePage.com as part of the search terms and uses that to find her answer. Hers wasn't the only interview that mentioned search, just the most specific. So at this point, we had a large research institution, the Folger, telling us we should build better search. We had a small historic site saying that search was really important to them. We had all these dot votes, and we're like, maybe we should build better search.
Okay, but we already had search, right? So let's talk a little bit about what we had. Now, let me start by saying search is really hard. When we were developing the original search function, I was really lucky to stumble across this passage in a review of a digital scholarly edition. The reviewer points out that a naive approach to text can run into huge problems when it's past markup tagging, right? Non-standard characters or even word spanning line breaks. You know, the reviewer even describes the search function as illiterate, based on, because it can't read the encoding strategies that were used by the editors, right? So since From the Page supports a lot of different markup strategies, the application itself needs to be able to process that markup for search. So since we know what tags From the Page supports in the advanced editor, we can process the markup using rules that are similar to the ones that we use when we're formatting text for HTML, or formatting text for PDF exports, right? It's just kind of another format. So one of the things we were doing was stitching words together if they spanned 2 lines based on whether they were transcribed with line continuing marks like hyphens or colons at the end of the line. We could replace abbreviations with their expansions, which is a form of regularization that works really well for people trying to do searches.
But only if they were
Only if they're
marked up.
tagged, right? Yeah. So for projects that use subject indexing, we want to keep the original verbatim text that mentions a subject in order to support phrase level searches. But we also want to append the canonical subject name to the search optimized text so that those pages would return in the search results. If someone is looking for Joe Smith and you have Mr. Smith in the text, but someone's tagged it as Joe Smith, you really want to be able to find that page. Tabular data. Wow, tabular data is really hard to cope with semantically, but what we were able to do is just convert it into kind of white space formatted text. Then probably the most important thing we did was remove any remaining tags. Well, this worked pretty well for full text search to find relevant pages within a collection, but that's not the only kind of searching people do. What about volunteers who are searching for projects that might interest them? What about editorial assistants or staff members searching for works that they've been assigned to transcribe or that they've assigned to work on or review? What about potential volunteers searching for an institution? One of the hardest things about these scenarios is that they each search against and return different kinds of records, collections, works, organizations, projects. Pages, yes. How could we search across them all? We started having conversations with our colleagues, had a great talk with James Creel at the Texas Conference on Digital Humanities that spring, and then Sarah had...
We'll talk about this some more,
yes,
many
right,
more
yes,
conversations to
yes,
start
so
thinking
talking about these
this.
things.
So kind of...
right. So the other problem, right, one of the other problems with this, obviously, is if you have all these different searches, what does that look like? The search interface ended up being really inconsistent, not only in terms of returning results, but also in terms of the UI for searching, right? This is examples I screenshotted from 3 different spots in the application, and it's just kind of horrible.
So, once we were committed to this, how did we go about developing it? So the first thing we did, and probably the first thing most of us do when we're starting a new hard project, is we asked our friends about it. So we were working on this in the summer of 2024, and I made it my small talk question at the IIIF conference in LA. It's always nice to have something to ask people about to start a conversation. And this was great because I was very curious about what people did for search, how they approached it. And this was a room full of digital library people. After discussions with a couple of folks, I was referred to Adam Brin, who's at the Getty Research Institute, and he was kind enough to spend an entire break walking me through how modern search worked and helping me understand how search and our objects, those organizations, collections, works, pages, could all work together and all kind of coexist in a search infrastructure and all be returned by searches. I took a ton of notes. That's kind of what I screenshotted here. But probably the most useful piece of advice Adam gave was the line highlighted at the bottom, that we should probably define all of this in a document and then hire a consultant to help us with it.
So talking to peers is one way of gathering data, but we also wanted to do analysis. So how was our existing search working? One of our interns built a way of tracking searches across the site, different kinds of searches, what they were searching against, what they were returning. And we logged that over the course of about 6 months to a year. I think it ended up being about 9 months. So we didn't only look at the query, but we also looked at the context. Were you searching inside a work or inside a collection? But then were the results useful? Right? Did the user actually get any search hits? Did they click on any? Did they take actions like transcribing or editing a page if they did click through? Those would be, the gold that someone was trying to do, right? That's the whole point. We found some patterns that surprised us. The first pattern that we saw was that a lot of potential volunteers don't really have landing pages for the organization they volunteer for bookmarked. They are searching for it on FromThePage every single time. So we needed to be able to support volunteers searching for organizations through a search bar. The next pattern that surprised us was staff at archives or research assistants at documentary editions that were locating specific documents by their own identifier or call number or shelf mark, right? These tend to be in our platform in imported metadata. They're rarely even displayed, but it turns out to be a really important workflow in a lot of projects. Finally, the last thing that surprised us was that we saw a lot of researchers, probably genealogists, who were searching for family names in genealogical collections. This is an example that I saw someone searched today in a collection of transportees to Van Diemen's Land and one of our Australian collections, and someone's searching for the name Ballymorn. Well, they're researching ancestors, and
most likely,
that's
yep.
something that we probably need to be able to support.
Well, and because our volunteers, our transcribers on FromThePage, the vast majority of them are genealogists, and yeah, let's make them happy. Let's help them find the things once they've put all this work in transcribing. So we took what we learned from our customer research, those surveys and interviews. We combined it with the technical details we had gathered from our search logging and discussions with our peers, and we turned it into what's called a product requirements document. I did get to have fun using a new AI tool to turn my pile of notes and ideas and goals into a well-structured PRD. And then we were able to use this when we were interviewing and talking to search consultants. So while we love new things, we knew developing an entirely new skill set for this project would not probably be the most efficient approach. So we reached out to some colleagues and were referred to some search consultants until we landed on Dan Worley, who works with a lot of small projects like ours. Dan is actually on this call listening in.
Hi, Dan.
Dan took our goals and notes and was able to turn them into an Elasticsearch implementation. Not only that, he was a super calm, competent engineer, a real pleasure to work with. And if you ever need an Elasticsearch consultant for your organization, we strongly recommend Dan. But after that initial implementation, we spent a lot of time testing, and we built this kind of long list of test cases based on the searches we had captured earlier and what we knew people were trying to do. Occasionally, we'd get support requests for things that people couldn't find or thought they should be able to find. And so we kind of turned all of those into different test cases. And there's some here that say failed, but they're actually passed.
They pass now.
They pass now. So, okay, so now we're actually going to do a demo of how this search works, hopefully what you all came to see. And then we'll come back and just do a couple of kind of advanced things and other possibilities that we're thinking about with this.
Okay, so we deployed this new search feature and enabled it yesterday. So you may have seen this already, but so one of the things that we've done is we've added a search to the Find a Project page. And this is the first time we've ever had a site-wide search. So if I search for, say, tobacco, then that is going to search pages, it's going to search collections, and it's going to search different kinds of projects, you know,
organizations.
Organizations
I mean, I don't think we have any
and
that have
works
that, but
across the entire site. So we can see the first search result is a tobacco peddler's certificate from 1874 on a project that is hosted at the High Point Museum. The next item we see is a collection, the papers of Robert Carter, that was just launched by the UVA library, I believe, last week. Then we've got another High Point Museum tobacco warehouse company deed, a project at
North Carolina
State Archives.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you just keep on going, see things in the Wisconsin Historical Society. It's a really neat little view. But because we're mixing these kinds of results, we also have the ability to filter them down. So if we are only interested in the collections that mention tobacco, then
collections,
we can see
and
those.
they need to be mentioned like in the title or the description or
Right.
the metadata
Right.
specific to the collection.
Yeah, we can't really extrapolate. If we look just for works, those are going to look at, we're going to see results that are based on titles, descriptions, but also metadata, right? Any kind of imported metadata field might have that in there. So then pages, of course, is going to be familiar, except we're searching for pages across the entire site. So any of the, you know, what I think we're up to like 3 or 4 million pages on From the Page, 6,000 of them apparently mention tobacco or show up as search results. And so we can see here a handful of pages from a spreadsheet-based transcription project, the Shipping Stories transcription project. So this is a financial account book, and you can see the people here are paying with their crops of tobacco, and they are, you know,
these are at the top because of how many times they mention tobacco. So if you're interested in tobacco, this is the page to go look at.
Right.
But you do have to page through a lot of results to,
yes.
you know, we have many other.
And if we were to go down to, you know, further pages, we'd probably see more varied results. There we go. So we've got, we have a handful of agricultural diaries.
Ben's projects, which is why he always uses tobacco
exactly.
as a search term.
Yeah. So that is the cross-site search. And I should mention that if we were to search for, say, something like Carolina, in addition to collections and works and pages, we'd also be able to see any of the organizations that mention Carolina in their names or descriptions. So,
and those usually show up at the top of the all. Can you actually go back to the previous page and go to all?
Yeah, I think
they
do show up at the top.
So that, you know, we know that one of the most common uses of that Find a Project page is to find the project you're trying to work on, and you probably have, you know, the organization that recruited you or that you have a relationship with in your head.
Yeah. So the other new feature that we've added is the ability to do a search across all collections within an organization. So if I go to the Indiana State Archives pages on From the Page, They have quite a large number of documents and of collections, sorry, and a lot of them are of interest to genealogists, right? We've got naturalization records, we've got land books, we have all these great lists of names from the Civil War, World War I, World War II. So if I were to search for my own surname,
because we all do vanity
right,
searches, right? And family history searches.
So what we get here is results from a number of field-based transcription projects. One is deceased World War I, World War II veterans. The next one we see World War I service record cards. Actually, the next few we see are service record cards. And then we keep going down, and we might hit some of the draft lists or other things like that. So this is pretty exciting to me, at least. And we can do similar things if we search, say, for bourbon within the Kentucky Historical Society. This search is interesting to me because it doesn't just return pages, it also returns a work, an agreement between Evans, Shelby, and Piercewold to manufacture rye whiskey. So, you have different kinds of things where we're mixing these.
I like how
results.
this mixes like textual transcription projects and structured.
Yeah. So we've
stuff
got a
too.
work, and then we've got 2 pages from different kinds of projects. And so this is potentially a really neat view into collections. So let's move back to our, and John, we'll get your question later. So we'll go back to our slideshow.
So, right, there's more. Like this is kind of the catch-all of the other things I wanted to talk about. So next slide. So one thing we are super excited about is the possibility of building some kind of thematic search portals. This would look just like the organization search, like what we just saw with the Kentucky Historical Society, but we could cherry pick collections from different organizations. So I know on From the Page, we have a lot of 19th century American documents. So you can envision building a portal for something like that, or
we host Civil War governor's papers from 3 different states. Well,
right.
Could we combine those?
Right.
Search across all 3.
Right. Also, like early modern recipes, the kind of the original search discussion was around that. So there's a lot of potential there, and this is surprisingly easy to build now that we have this infrastructure, which we think is cool. Next slide. This actually addresses some of what John was asking in the chat. Because this search is backed by Elasticsearch, which is a very robust modern search infrastructure, you can do a lot of advanced search syntax. Now, we know from what we saw when we captured all the searches that were happening that most people don't. But if you want to be able to do advanced searches, this is the simple query syntax that I just pulled out of the Elasticsearch documentation. And you can do a lot of things like putting strings in quotes or negating something, taking out, thank you. Taking out words. Give me everything that mentions tobacco, but doesn't mention this other thing. So, there's a lot of possibilities there for people who want to kind of dig deep. As we said, we rolled this out yesterday. We're coming a little bit close to the line for this webinar. And the next thing that we need to do is measure success. So, we know when we looked at those and original kind of captured the searches people were doing, the data we were looking for, we're like, okay, are they finding what they need, right? If you click through and read something, then you probably found what you need. Although it's interesting because we're returning searches with a lot of context, like the results may have what you need. You may not need to go dig into the page. We are a volunteer platform where volunteers do a lot of transcription work for institutions. So we'd really love to see the number of searches that people are doing that lead to contributions to go up, right? We want people to search for something and then to transcribe it. Wouldn't that be great, right? But we're also curious to see whether people who aren't logged in, if we have an increase in how many documents that they actually go view. That kind of to us is the genealogist or the researcher role. And, for project owners, we want to make sure their searches are successful, right? We want to make, if they search for something, do they get somewhere?
Right.
So that's one of those are some of the success metrics we're going to look at. We also have a list of about probably 6 of you that are on this call, or maybe didn't make this call, but that we're going to do some kind of interviews or kind of guided search, kind of have people put on their hat of here's how I use search and here's the type of things I'm looking for in from the page, and kind of watch how they use it and see if they actually succeed or not. And we want feedback. If you're on this call, we know you're interested in this, and if it works for you, please tell us. And if it doesn't, we really want to know, because those are the much more interesting cases. One more slide that says feedback and questions, but you don't have to.
Yes, right.
So we have some questions.
Okay, so we're going to take questions in the chat. So let's come through, and shall we address John's here? John's first one is, have we considered adding a faceted search where we could filter to or exclude collections, organizations, etc. from the search results? Or can you filter in the search box itself with not or minus?
So second question.
Second question, the answer is yes. We need to do a much better job of making that user-friendly and documenting it.
Yeah.
But that is definitely something that has the capability there. In terms of faceted search, the underlying technology that we're using does a great job potentially of supporting facets. But one of the things that we need to figure out is, so much metadata that's brought in is heterogeneous. You have one project bringing metadata in that says a document is in French based on a language code that has a label that says lang. And another project may bring in language, French. And, trying to standardize that is potentially really hard.
Let's see. Brian Thomas asks if there's partial word matches. If you search for tobacco, can you get all the results for tobacco? And Dan jumped in, thank you, Dan, and says prefix search is supported. So if you do tobacco star, then we'd match anything. I agree. Incorporating an implicit wildcard would be interesting. I was doing some searching on some non-standard spelling. Many of us, these historic documents do not have super standard spelling. So thinking about how we can address that better is something we should spend some time on.
Right. And we have, that might not be the search engine's job. That might be something we do as we transform text to put into the search engine.
Let's see, Debbie Lyles says very nice things. I'm playing with the search right now and love it so far. Thrilled.
Okay, next question. This may be an odd question, but is it okay for researchers to use from the page to search content without being a participating organization or transcriber? I ask because I see content applicable to a faculty member I work with regarding genealogy. So that's a really interesting question.
Yes, it's fine.
Our answer is yes, right? There are some institutions that we host that would really prefer that researchers search their digital collection systems. And of course, we support linking to those in your footers, and everything that's displayed drives, has the potential to show people a place to do more research at the institutional repositories or the digital library system.
But this is more about who can do search, and the answer is anyone can do search.
Right, anyone can do search, and we are really hoping that we can get potential volunteers or researchers involved in finding material that they are interested in, and that then converts them into becoming volunteers. So they know that your organization has a collection that mentions, airplanes, and they're searching for Cessnas and they find it, and suddenly, wow, they're in airplane heaven.
Let's see. Bruno asks, can we search subject tags? Let's scroll up a little bit. Thank you. And how does the new search handle date fields and metadata? It'd be great to order works chronologically. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, the first one is easy.
Okay, the first one is you can search pages that mention a subject tag successfully using search, right?
Using either
the verbatim text or the canonical name. We have not currently ingested the subject articles into the search engine yet. So you can't search for a subject itself and see that subject and kind of land on the subject page and read the article and see the index to it.
But we do highlight, so if you're searching for the subject's canonical name and from the page, so James Smith, and the tag, the verbatim text is Jimmy, we highlight Jimmy successfully in the search results, right? I'm pretty sure I tested that the other day.
Great.
I think so. We'll check that one to make sure.
How does the new search handle date fields and metadata? So it would be great to order works chronologically, right? That gets back into the question that I think John was asking earlier about facets. That it would be amazing, but it is so we're likely to be able to ingest subject articles into the search engine a lot faster than we can solve this problem, because the metadata is so heterogeneous between different projects.
Charlie Perez asks, are page level results sorted by TF-IDF as a relevance metric or something similar? Noticed in the demo that it wasn't purely based on number of hits. Curious how you implemented that. Okay, so I think there's a couple of different answers to that. One of them is we weight objects. So our objects are pages, works or documents, collections, users. Depending on where you're searching, some of them only give you pages and some of them give you all of those types of items. But any item that is returned by the search, we prioritize, this is the order it's weighted in. So this is the order that they come back in. Organizations first, collections next, documents/works next, pages next. So that's one of the answers.
Right. And also different fields within each of those types may be weighted differently. So if a term shows up in a work title, it is weighted higher than if it shows up in a work description, for example. Then we get to general weighting, and we may have to, are we doing TF-IDF? And I may have to ask Dan to take that question and respond to the chat. How do we connect rye whiskey and bourbon? That absolutely was not word embeddings or similarities or similar. The way that we saw the application for rye whiskey when we were pulling up bourbon is that bourbon was mentioned in the description of that work. So no magic was happening. There was just a description that was there.
Dan jumped in the chat and says, yes, it's a variation of TF-IDF. So that's called term frequency inverse document frequency, i.e. how often does this word show up in this document? And the more it shows up in the document, the higher it's ranked. So if you think about when we searched for tobacco and we saw the shipping, it's the
shopping stories, all the store ledgers.
The store ledgers, they had tobacco 20 times in one page, and guess what? That's the most heavily weighted in a TF-IDF world.
Okay. Okay. Collections. Okay.
I'm not sure I get the context for. I see it's linked to the collection where the item is housed.
Let's go into Beverly's question. Are we?
Wait, I'm going to make a comment on that. So one thing that we worked very hard on is, because we were returning items across institutions, collections, all of it works, is that every search result has breadcrumbs at the bottom that helps you navigate back up.
Yeah, we were decontextualizing these pages and these search results in ways that we've never done before, right? So we really needed to be able to track that.
Right, and help people find that.
Right. Are we working on or planning to work on semantic search? For example, if I search war, can you show me results for battle and other related terms? This might be an AI or LLM question for later consideration.
I can answer this.
Okay, yes, all right, yes.
So I actually built just a prototype of a collection search that was a semantic search, uses RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where you try to match pages and then you package them all up and you send them to an LLM and you try to get a natural language result out of it. It's actually pretty cool. It is definitely not on this year's roadmap. We have a lot of other cool AI things and non-AI things that we're trying to get out the door. But yeah, keep talking to us about this, because I think this makes more sense at a collection level than at these bigger scopes.
Well, and I think that there definitely is a use case for this. One of the examples that we heard about early, like almost 10 years ago, was a researcher at the Kentucky Historical Society who was looking at the Civil War governor's papers and was trying to analyze instances of terrorism during the Civil War. You've got in Kentucky, it's a border area, there are raids on both sides, people burning down each other's houses, all this stuff. And the problem is that the answer is yes, there was loads of it, but they didn't use that word to describe it. And so the researcher really needed to be looking for words like brigandage or things like that, that does not occur to you. So we would love to make something like that possible.
Yeah.
Okay, comment by Jen Grunenberg. This is fantastic. I was trying to search for H. Lost it. H apostrophe Y in our collection. It's an abbreviated name for Henry, and I can't find it. I can now find it. All right. I think that the tick was apostrophe was throwing off the search previously. All right, great.
Good, because we had to go through quite a few iterations to get things with punctuation in the middle of them to work right. Yes. If you think about identifiers for many of your documents, they have underscores,
call numbers, shelf marks,
they have dashes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was actually something we had.
That was a lot of work. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think that
is there more at the bottom or not?
All the questions. The Zoom chat is kind of bouncing around on us because of the back and forth between Dan and so, cool. And as Dan points out, all this is open source. Yeah. Dan just dropped a link to bits of the source code that does what Charlie was asking about. Yeah. Yeah. So are there any other questions people have? Suggestions?
Feedback?
Oh, could we incorporate question mark wildcards in future versions? That may be another question for Dan.
Or we might have to go read the Elasticsearch documentation.
Yeah, well, obviously Sarah and I need to come up to speed on the details of Elasticsearch wildcards, and we need to be able to document them and explain them to other people. And there's a chance we might have to do some query parsing to watch people typing the words and or things like that.
Except I don't think people will. So I like the idea of building some of this wildcardness in automatically.
Right. Oh, interesting.
So we'll figure that out. Yeah. Yeah, people are looking forward to trying new search.
Right, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. If you see something that's unusual or that's comment worthy, please send us email at support@fromthepage.com. That goes to both of us. And
if you have searches that don't work, that's what I'm actually really curious about. Those are the more interesting ones, right?
But really, anything you find that is noteworthy, we really want to know about it.
Yeah. So thank you all for showing up. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.